All right, let me turn that light off. All right, everybody. So, since I don't see anyone here already, let us do this because I wanted to try. I saw last time a share screen button. Let me open the app I want to use. Let's talk about confidence because I like to use a drawing when we talk about that. So let's talk about confidence because people will often come in you know, I teach trumpet. Yes, everybody knows that. I also teach composition. Maybe not everybody knows that, but I teach that. Okay. Right now, I don't think I have any composition students, but you know, off and on over the last 20 years, I've had. You know what? You know what the weirdest thing is about my composition teaching is that when I first started teaching composition, it was all my students were professional, and they were all like the top people in Houston for what they did. And somehow they heard that I was a composer. And you know what? I'm not saying that if I was the type of guy that used that to advertise, hey, you should come take lessons with me because all these famous people were taking lessons with me, I would have done that a long time ago. I'm not like that. I'm not saying that now for that reason. I just think it's kind of strange, right? When you think about starting starting teaching, um, you think that you start with the beginners. That's how I started teaching trumpet lessons. Someone couldn't afford lessons when I was in high school, and my band director says, "Hey, could you teach this guy?" And that's how I got started in teaching, and I've been doing it ever since. But really weird. The two first composition students that I taught were both like over 60 years old, maybe older than that. I don't want to give away too much. And you know what that tells me? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one they took lessons with. That just tells me what kind of beautiful attitude those guys had in their older age. That they were still willing to learn and explore things and stuff like that. And willing to put their um, their money into it, right? So anyway, yes, I've been teaching composition. I've taught finale lessons, which is now debunked, so nobody should be taking any finale lessons at all now, because they shut the program down. But you know what else I teach? And I've only had a few students that started off saying this. I also teach as a separate subject. So if you don't play trumpet, if you're not composition, I also teach stage fright. How do you cope with stage fright? I also do that. Um, and, you know, one of the things that there's several things that I teach about stage fright that are very, very different. And this is one of them. So let me find this share screen thing. Because when I was looking around last time, share screen, there it is. All right. Look at that. Okay, here we go. I hope this works. I'm sharing screen now. Okay. So, this is how I see everybody. This is how I see everybody. I hope you can see this. Okay. There is no limit to how good we can be. And there is also no limit to, and I always have to joke about this. You think you've heard bad trumpet players. You don't know how bad it can get. Okay, so we have an infinity on the bottom, we have an infinity on the top. And all of us are here. Do you see the representation here? We are not nearly as good as we could be. We're not nearly as bad as we could be. We are somewhere between those two extremes. Okay? Now, the only time where we are on this line is a problem. I'm going to say this again. The only time where we are on this line is a problem is when we compare ourselves to other people. So, everybody else has the same line. Everybody else is somewhere between infinity and infinity. Everybody else has the same problem as we do, but some of them are here. They're just a tiny bit ahead of you. Some of them, in contrast, and you know where I'm going with this. I'm drawing with my mouse, so be patient. Some of them are here. You have people who are better than you. You have people who are worse than you. And none of these people, I make it look extreme because of, let's do this again, right? The real numbers are probably more like, I'll put them all on the same line. Here we are. And really, since that's an infinity and that's infinity, what it probably really looks like is this. And like this would be, this line here would be the best trumpet player in the world. And this, I always have to laugh when I think about the worst because it can get bad. I've got some stories I can tell about. Yeah. And you know what? Those people would, the people who would laugh about it too if we were all sitting together. Okay. So, did I do that correctly? All right. So, do you see what I'm saying? Where we are in relationship to everybody else is the only thing that makes us nervous. If we visualize ourselves as being far from the best we could do and far from the worst, the confidence levels can go up. That's not the only way. This is not my. Really, what I wanted to do was test the share screen button, right? I just wanted to test the share screen button, but That's one of the things I teach, one of the visualizations I teach when we're talking about confidence and stage fright and all that stuff. All right, here's someone called Pamela. I can't say the name. Pamela Aaron. Pamela Aaron Farib or Faripe. Can you play Who is the Lord's Who is on the Lord's Side tune Hermes? Let me look that up. Yes, I can play it. I just don't have all this stuff in my head. Which one is Hermes? There's Armageddon. I don't see Hermes here. Okay, let me go back to the search and make sure it's got Hermes. I'm assuming Hermes is the tune. Yeah, when I go onto the page, it doesn't have the word I'm looking for. Yeah, I'll have to look it up. When you say, "Can I do it?" You're asking for like in a video? Hello, Seppo. Nice to see you. Karen says, "Hi, Eddie. Listening on the phone because the website has last week's." I wish I would remember that. When I put that together, I was in a hurry. I'm sorry. Let me fix that now. Oh, I can't fix that now. Oh, yes, I can. Let me, because we're still early in it. Ay, ay, ay. You know, if my sales pitch was, "Hey, look how perfect I am. Everybody should be more like me," it would be a disaster because I'm not perfect. I screw a bunch of stuff up all the time. Okay, here we go. I just changed it. It should be on the website now if you want to switch. I'm sorry about that. Okay, Seppo says, "I have noticed that every player has his or her limits. If you want to be good at trumpet, don't fear them, but respect." You know, that sounds very much, hello, David. That sounds very much like what my grandfather used to say about snakes. So my grandfather, on my mother's side, his house used to be, I say used to be because they've added new developments and stuff, used to be out in the woods. And he used to have to go before the kids uh, walk to church. Was it church or was it school? I don't think they had a school in that area. Um, but anyway, maybe they had to walk to the corner to get to the bus stop or something like that. Um, he had to go in the summers. Well, I guess they wouldn't have to do that in the summer. And clear all of the copperheads off the street. Uh, and so yes, copperheads were a big problem up there. I don't, Never really heard him talk about rattlesnakes, but the copperheads were a problem. Um, and he taught me from a very, very early age. And I think this influenced me as an adult. I, the Bible says, fear not. It's like someone pointed out that the Bible has enough fear nots to cover every day of the year or something like that. You know, we're not supposed to live our life in fear. And my grandfather demonstrated that with the whole snake thing. He says, don't be afraid of the snakes, respect the snakes. That's the word he used. Respect the snakes. Respect the fact that they can bite you and make you sick and even kill you. Right? You respect that fact, but you don't let. And I think what we're talking about here is the difference between emotion and knowledge. Your emotions, you don't have control over that. Well, I guess you do kind of. Um, but what I mean is that fear happens, right? But you can quell that fear. I should take back what I just said. I can't believe I said that. We do have control over our emotions. Why did I say the other? That's very interesting because you know what it is? When I talk about happiness, I don't. So fear and happiness, those are both emotions that don't interest me. And I've had people tell me, well, that because I believe this about happiness, that it's going to make me sick. Maybe they were right. um, but I think that's their belief. I think it's like we have levels of belief. I truly believe this. We have levels of belief. And I think that this thing about everybody's got to be happy is not Christian. It's a philosophical belief, very much tied to um, what is it called? Cosmopolitan, uh, or anyway. So this desire to be happy all the time. Happy is an emotion that comes and goes. So when I say we have no control over our emotions, um, that's actually not true. But I say that, so that's why it came out so easy. Why I so easily said um, that we don't have control over our emotions is because um, I do believe that to some extent, this is interesting. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm working through some of this stuff. Um, we have control, but I think what we mean when we say we don't have control, I think what we really mean, and it's very important to say what you actually mean. I think what we actually mean is that you will never stop feeling emotions. And where the emotions go, whether you get angry or you're afraid or you're in love or happy, sad, these things are hormonal mostly, and they happen to you. Now we have control over how much, maybe that's a better way to say it. We have control over how those emotions affect us. We have control over how much they affect us. So when it comes to fear, it's not that we don't have fear. The fear is there. We talk about people who have courage. Courage is not someone who has no fear. Courage is someone who's got fear but does the right thing anyway. And I'll tell you what, um, I'll tell you what, when you don't exercise the control of your person over your emotions, so what I said earlier was true. We can't control our emotions. Now I figured it out how to say it. We can't control our emotions. What we can do is how we control ourselves in response to those emotions. Does that make sense? Okay, so Seppo says, I mean that good players listening to good players sometimes affects us to fear not to try to overcome those challenges. That's right. And I see where you're going with that, because when we look at when we compare ourselves to other people, we think it's too far. We think that we can accomplish that. You know who, very interestingly, the the older we get, oftentimes the more that fear kicks in, because we think that we're running out of time. We think when with that, because if you're 70 years old, you think you don't have much time left to learn this trumpet thing. And uh, you know, there's a lot of people that have that as a motivation for the fear. So yes, the whole emotion thing. I like to use. I'm not part of the Stoic philosophy, but Stoic can also be used as a adjective or an adverb, right? I'm not part of the Stoic philosophy because they get into some deep stuff that I don't believe. Okay. Um, but I am a Stoic person. So Stoic with a little s. So I tell people often that I'm a Stoic Christian. Christian with a big C, Stoic with a little s. David says Herb Albert is 89 and still touring. That's correct. Same thing with now officially. What's his name? The guy that was on Johnny Carson. I keep forgetting his name. He's retired a few times, if I remember right, and he's still going. And when you see him, I saw him at ITG a few years ago. Oh yeah, Doc Severinsen. I saw him a few times, and he's like really nothing slowing him down. You know what? I have a video about this. I don't think it's your age that slows you down. I think it's your health. And what happened to me in these last couple months demonstrated that perfectly. It's weird that it went away so quickly. I got out of the hospital and I'm back to normal again. Maybe a tiny bit of loss on the endurance side, tiny bit. But I haven't been able to play for months. And I don't know how many of you guys I've told this to already. I actually stopped taking most gigs. When I say most gigs, I would ask people when the call came in, I would say, what kind of gig is it? What are we doing? I stopped taking most gigs in November. I didn't want to publicize that back then because this is still what I do for a living. And my plan was to work through this and start eating, shift my eating. I was already working on that. Anyway, so my plan was I didn't want anyone to know for a lot of different reasons. One is I don't really talk about that stuff publicly. But yes, I was actually, and I actually thought about this. I was actually one of those people who couldn't play because of my health, not my age. It was an old age health problem, but um, it was bad enough that if you guys see the hymn that I did um, a few weeks ago, I had to splice two verses together. If you watch, and when the one verse is done, it pans into the next one because I could not do. It was impossible, physically impossible for me to uh, to do two hymn verses in a row. Seppo asks, when speaking about improvisation, which tools do you recommend to start learning it in a very fundamental level? When you say tools, are you talking about like technique? I mean, uh, technology. So I'm a big fan of the play along stuff, but that might not be what you're talking about. So like iReal Pro, uh, iReal Pro and Band in a Box are great tools for practicing your improv. Let me tell you, and I have a video about this, but I don't mind sharing it right now, just an abbreviated version. Oh, so he's asking, hello, Creso. I hope I'm saying your name right. Um, like, how do you do that the very first time at a lesson? So, the very first thing I do in improv, okay, so I say very first thing. The reason I say very first thing is because it overlaps, the actual first stuff overlaps with the improv stuff. I want them to do first. This is before the first stuff, okay? We want them to do first the expansion study on the scale. Hello, Jordan. Jordan says aloha from Hawaii. Woohoo! Um, we want to expand the C major scale first. Let me emphasize right now how important this expansion stuff is. If you have a student that's got the patience for it, this, the more I do this with my students, the more convinced I am that this is, now, especially in combination with the tonalization studies, this is one of the most important things that I teach now, is that expansion study. Now, it's better if they can do that on their own, but a lot of my students either don't have time or don't have the patience, and we end up doing all the expansion stuff in their lesson time. That's my philosophy, by the way. I know I'm on a tangent of a tangent. That's my philosophy. If the students don't practice at home, we do the practice in their lesson. And there's no guilt. Um, some of them, I don't know what they're doing when they're on their own, but it's not what we're doing. Okay. And that's okay. The more serious they become, the more they'll take a charge of what they're doing at home. Let me say that one more time. The more serious they become, the more they'll take charge of that on their own at home. So until that happens, we will do together what they should be doing at home. All right. So I've had a lot of students lately. You know, my teaching changes over the years because of the attitude of the students. And it's when I first started doing the expansion stuff, nobody would do it at all. They thought I was nuts, and they just wouldn't do it. And if because it's a commercial model, part of my job uh, is to convince them that they need to do it. And it's like they couldn't. I couldn't convince them to do it. Now I've got students doing it, and it's amazing the difference. It's amazing the difference. Okay. Even the ones that only do it in the lesson are markedly different, markedly improved from the ones that never did it at all. Okay. So, so that's the first thing. And this comes before they start the jazz. Then I want them to be able to do the tonalizations before they start the jazz in that C, in the first key, the C. Then, so this is answering your first question. I mean, not your first question, your question about the jazz stuff. The first thing I have them do when they've got that far is what I call the jazz improv expansion. Okay? The jazz improv expansion, which is you start with one note. We usually do this. Now, you can do it on any song. We usually do this on their very first song, which is a song I wrote. I won't go into details about why I have them do one of my songs first. It's not an ego trip. There's a reason for it. But so I'll start them normally on G or F. Doesn't really matter. And it's a bossa nova, so the improv will sound something like this. And it will be, I want them to make music with just one note. Then they have to rest, and we do that we add a note. In this case, we're going to add F. And we just keep adding notes until we've got all the notes. And this helps them become creative without having to learn all this other stuff first. It puts creativity first. I mean, who can't? Who can't with 3 notes? Once you get the 3 notes, you start having stuff that sounds like music, right? And who can't do that? I've not had any students. The only ones who can't do that are the ones who are really like overly eager. I like eager students. But yes, you can be so overly eager that it messes everything up. So David says, do you have a book on expansion studies? Yes, I do. I have 2 of them. One of them is the band expansion studies, which you can get like on Amazon and all that stuff. I don't recommend that if you're not in band or if you're not doing. After I wrote that book, I started getting sales in the UK because the UK system of scales that they do in their testing stuff is the same format as my book. So people are buying that book in the UK. I think probably more over there than they are over here, even though we have probably hundreds of thousands more trumpet players doing it over here than they are over there. But I think people here have a different attitude about that kind of stuff. So the other book is only an ebook. It's called Major Scale Expansion Studies. And the main difference between these two is that the band scale studies have a rhythm, and they ascend first. Now, in order to make this book work for everybody, I made it descend first. That way, when you get to the top of your range, you just stop. If you ascend first, you never get those bottom notes, and you would have to have a different book for every skill level. So this scale expansion studies, major scale expansion studies, it's at Tiger Music, it's at Sheet Music Plus, it's at Sheet Music Direct. Okay, so let's not confuse that. Okay, I think it's those three places. There's probably other places too, but yes, it's available as a PDF at my site and Sheet Music Plus and stuff like that. Oh, the link on my website doesn't work. This is not good. Let me see here. Oh, I see what you're saying. I never put the link there. There is no link. Scroll down. Sorry to make you do that. Scroll down over half the page. In fact, I'll tell you what. Oh, it's not here. That's the problem with having too many books. That's why it's not on there, is because I haven't put it on the page yet. Let me find on the on the Tiger Music site. And I'll put a link up. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about these expansion studies. These are meant to be only done one time. When you're done with them, you're done with them. Now, does that mean nobody does them again? I have students that says, please. I had a student in San Francisco. He says, I know you said only do it one time, but I like them so much. Can I please do them again? And I told him, I said, as long as it's not part of your practice schedule, if you're doing it because you like it, then don't put it in your routine, is what I told him. Don't put it in the routine. You know, in other words, don't, here's a link. Don't, don't squeeze out your tonalization study to make room for the expansion that you already did. So the expansion studies are to be done once. And I'm not sure how much impact they have if you already know all the keys. So that let me make that a caveat right there, because I don't know that it's as beneficial if you already know all the keys. Now, if you have a key, let's say you know F sharp, for example, you know F sharp, but you always have problems with it. Well, maybe this will work in that context, right? If you can't sight read F sharp as well as you sight read any other key, then maybe starting over in F sharp can have that kind of impact, where you start with the expansion, go to the tonalization studies, and that way. That might have some impact, but yeah. All right, so Seppo says, which progression do you use at the very basic level? Um, what do you mean by progression? Are you talking about chords? Are you talking about chord progression? I like to use songs, if you are talking about chord progressions, I like to use songs that stay in one key. So the very first song we do that's not mine is Autumn Leaves, the Miles Davis version, because the Autumn Leaves doesn't have the turnaround going to the F. I mean, the Miles Davis version, if I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong about this. The Miles Davis version does not have that turnaround going to F. So when my students practice it, we don't do that turnaround. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because when it's like 3/4 of the way through the song, there's a, and we, by the way, we do this in the key of A minor, our A minor. I say C. People get upset about that because it ends on A minor. I think it's in C because it starts in C major. Okay, right? I don't care that's it's the same thing rings either way, right? Anyway, so I like that song because it stays. You get that major minor axis. You know what's weird? I learned that axis stuff when I was in college. I didn't know how rare that music theory was. People don't talk about the axis. The axis is that pivot between major and minor. So you basically haven't changed keys, you've changed modes. So the first songs that I teach are songs that have changing from the major mode to the minor mode, but no other modulations. We might have, like in the second song or the third song, we might have some, uh, what do you call it, secondary dominance. I try to avoid the secondary dominance because that really should be played differently. But since I can't find, I'm still looking now. I'm in the process of formalizing some of this in a way that has not been formalized before, and it's taking a lot of time. But yes, I'm looking for songs that don't have any secondary dominance. But it's, that's what makes jazz jazz, is the chromaticism. Oh, it's part of it, right? It's part of what makes jazz jazzy. So that's what I look for, the progressions. I'm not looking, traditional jazz education looks to make the chords, the how long the chord is longer, so that you think about what chord you're on and then change for the next chord. So like often the first song that they teach will often be Freddie the Freeloader or something like that. But I don't do that. I'm more interested in improvising in the key and moving our way from that horizontal improv to a vertical improv. So yes, to summarize my answer to your question, the progressions are all as close to diatonic as possible. We don't want key changes. For the beginners, no key changes. That way they can improvise on a single scale for the whole song. Uh, Creso says, how do you teach vibrato? Two, I let the students choose which one they want to do. There are more than two different ways to do vibrato. I don't teach the other ways. So we do jaw vibrato, where you basically move your jaw up and down and while you play. I call it chewing on the notes. Okay, so you can chew on the notes, or we can do the hand vibrato. Now, for the longest time, I told people, and it's just not true anymore. For the longest time, I told people that I did classical vibrato with my jaw, and and jazz vibrato with my hand. And I mean, even up to recently, I've been telling students this, and I tell them that it's not physical, that just in my head, it helps me separate the two styles. But I've discovered that lately, that separation's not there anymore. And I've been doing jaw vibrato on jazz and on classical, and I've been doing hand vibrato on jazz and on classical. So, but yes, those are the two ones that I do. With the hand vibrato, it's really not your fingers, it's your thumb that does the vibrato. So a lot of people teach like this, right? Now, if it's truly the valves, if it's truly the fingers, then how do you do open? So really, it is the thumb. It really is the thumb. It's not the fingers. The fingers might give you a little bit more oomph on the vibrato because you got more contact. Um, Now, the exact question says, how do I teach vibrato? I have etudes that I use, that I wrote, that start off with just whole notes. It's just 3 etudes. And then we try to apply it after that to all the music. Um, so, like, I'm just making this up. We would have, now that's more of a jazz vibrato, but we would have long notes like that first. Then we mix long notes with short notes so that they can experiment with turning that on, turning that off. Now, I will tell you, when they first start, we want it to be exaggerated. Just like we do when we first teach dynamics. Dynamics, when you first teach a beginner, should be exaggerated. Um, Anything that's supposed to be subtle at the highest level should be exaggerated at the beginner level. Otherwise, it can't be subtle later because the signals haven't been input into the brain yet. It can't be subtle if you haven't trained yourself. And the way you train is through over exaggerated stuff. Okay? That's why when you have in kindergarten, you give those students the big pencil and with the big lines to write on, is because we want to have exaggerated lines. We want to have exaggerated movements. Those exaggerated movements train your mind faster. So when we do the vibrato as a beginner, we want it to be overly exaggerated. We want to have that so that they get used to it later. Now, I will also tell you this. A lot of people will never have a good vibrato if they don't listen to trumpet players that have good vibrato. And there's an infamous story from my past when because my dad listened to a lot of old-timey big band music, and I developed a vibrato. So we came from a traditional home, right? And we listened to what my father listened to. It wasn't until late, um, that any of us started listening to the music that we wanted to listen to in the house. Um, and I have nothing against that. Maybe I would if it wasn't good music. My dad. So I grew up with a lot of big band music, um, and then Beach Boys. My dad also liked the Beach Boys, but um, and Shauna and I type stuff too. So we did have some variety, but for most of the time it was big band music. But it was that old timey big band music with the fast vibrato, and that's what I heard. So like when I was in junior high, living in Hawaii, my vibrato was like the big band vibrato. Okay, so when I got to high school in El Paso, right, I did my audition, and my band director said that he'd never heard or he'd never seen a white mariachi player because the way I played to him sounded like mariachi. And so, yeah, they put me last chair in the last band, mostly because of my vibrato. And yeah, um, anyway, I do believe we have to exaggerate it so that it makes an impact. All right, so Seppo says, what, in your opinion, are the techniques to be included in one's nine age 9 to 15 weekly routine? Uh, I believe half they should have half of the time that they spend. I always ask them that first. I don't go the other way around. I ask them how much time are they practicing. Um, this is different for me than it is for most other teachers. I work with the students with how much time they have, and I'm not one of those teachers who will say, well, that's not enough time. I don't give them that guilt trip. We work with what they've got. And, I think there's some really weird, and I'm not talking about in schools. School's different, right? If you have a program and the students, they have a commitment. When I say school's different, they have a commitment to the other students. And they have an obligation to practice a certain amount because of that commitment to the other students. So you can, in a very practical way, say, hey, you're not practicing enough. We need more from you. You can do that in a way that's not going to like scare them away or something, because it makes them feel like they're part of something. I don't have that. My business model is they come to me and I help them get where they want to go. So their commitment, who's that commitment to? If they in their own motivation think that 30 minutes a day is okay, and I'm not saying it's not, but for what they're trying to do, who's to say it's not okay? So let me establish that first. Okay? I ask them how much time are they practicing? And then we talk about how to make that work for them. And the objective is to have half of that time, at least half of that time, be music, and when I say music, we want to be working on new musical material. The other half should be their exercises, their warm up, the routine. And that should really be, um, the same every day. I don't think the routine it should change in difficulty each day. I don't think the exercises should change every day. I hope that answers your question. Seppo says, Mr. Titanen speak about the same stuff. Very good. Nathan, hello Nathan. Mr. Lewis, I have my first recital in 2 months, and I will be playing Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee. How do you suggest I prepare for this recital? I am taking lessons for 6 months now. Have you learned the piece yet? If you haven't learned the piece, then I recommend working backwards instead of forwards. If you already know the piece, then at this point, I would say perform it. It's a mock performance, okay? Mock performance. Play it 50 times. And when I say 50 times, and most of my students don't do this, it's a little aggravating for me. When I say 50 times, I mean write it down. Okay, so like have a sheet of paper or a Post-it or something, like a square piece of paper like this. Every time you get through the piece, I'm going to use a Sharpie just so that it's clear on the screen. So let's say you play it right now. You finish playing it, you put a slash mark. Oh, he says he does not know the song. So yes, you would start first with, well, the first thing you do is study the song. Okay, study the song first. Then you do working backwards. Working backwards is something that was taught to me as a way to memorize music. It's an old technique, a memorizing technique that's been around since Franz Liszt. Okay, it's an old technique. I started using it as a technique for learning music because of the jazz stuff. Because I have a rule for myself in the jazz stuff that I don't look at the music I'm trying to learn. I don't look at the exercises I'm trying to learn. I only look at them when I'm not playing my horn. Then I look away and I play it. Well, since I was starting the songs by memory, I figured I would use the process of working backwards to learn the songs by memory. And by the way, when I learn a jazz tune, I apply that from the beginning. I don't read it first and then try to memorize it. Most people do it that way, right? No, I don't do that. What I do is memorize it first. I do the working backwards. Anyway, so the point is, over the years, I figured out that working backwards is just as powerful for learning a song as it is for memorizing a song. So I eventually started teaching the students to work backwards without memorizing. So now that's how I teach. When you prepare a song, the first thing you do is work backwards on it, not forward. What is working backwards? You play the last measure, the last two measures, you decide for yourself. You play the last bit. Of course, moving forward, it's amazing to me how many people think I'm saying play the song backwards. I am not saying, please do not practice the song backwards. Okay? I'm not saying play the song backwards. I'm saying start at the end first. Play the last bit first. Then play the previous bit. Now we want 10 times rep on each time. 10 times the last two measures, 10 times the second last two measures, then 10 times all of that together, and then you keep working your way to the beginning of the song. That's how we do it. Then after you finish that, if you have time left, you do this 50 times thing. Now, some of my students, if you're watching this, might say, well, I haven't done this 50 times thing. The 50 times thing is for public performances. Okay? So let's say you have a recital, and this is why I'm answering this person the way I said, Nathan. The reason I'm answering Nathan this way is because he says he's got a public performance. This is what I would teach for public performance. All right. So I hope that answers your question. Blifford Clown. I'm sure that's not your real name. He says, I made first area. Congratulations. Any tips for state? The biggest problem, now you're obviously talking about jazz. The biggest problem with state is that people freak out, and I don't know what that is. I don't get that. So the biggest tip I could give you based on my experience, I've been a judge 5 times for state jazz. I've had students make state jazz, stuff like that. I know the whole all state thing. I don't understand why people get so freaked out. That's the biggest thing. Every time I've judged, now I'm not saying it's like this every single time. Every time I've judged all state jazz, I've walked away thinking to myself, not a single one of these is qualified to be all state in my opinion. All 5 times, I've judged all state 5 times. I walked away all 5 times thinking not one of them was good enough to be all state. Is that a good thing? It's kind of a good thing if you're competing, right? That's kind of a good thing, because if you could be one of the ones that are not freaking out, if you can be one of those that's not freaking out, then you have a greater chance of winning than the other guys. And why do I say not freak out? How do I know that's what the problem is? Because every single time I judged, I had students in there. I'm like, where are my students? Where are these students? I know they play better than this. Huh? I heard them play better than this in my lesson. Where are they now? So when I see them the next time, I say, hey, what happened? They said, oh, I got nervous. Every single time they say I got nervous. So that's my biggest tip, is just don't let yourself get nervous. Remember, I started the whole Q and A off this way. I was talking about the stage fright stuff. And I clarified something that I haven't really sat and thought about like I did today. And I worked my way through some thoughts that I haven't worked through before, because I've had out of my mouth say you can't control your emotions. And then I realized that was conflicting what I had previously said about the fear. Right? So, and I worked it out here in front of you guys. Right? And it's true that we can't control our emotions, but we can control our reaction to those emotions. And I do believe that if we ignore our emotions, all of them, really, if we ignore all of them, the happiness, the sadness, the fear, the better we get at ignoring that stuff, the better our chance is of being able to ignore all that when we're in the moment, right? So, the salesperson that makes you feel really, really happy because he wants to take your money, that's the moment. But the moment is also when you're on stage performing and that fear starts welling up. You have to practice before you get there. You have to practice not letting that affect you. Anyway, um, Nathan says, I do not know this. Oh, yeah, we already said that. Seppo says, Ibrahim Malouf taught to play pieces backwards to us was difficult. Now you're saying play the song backwards or work from the end to the beginning. Nathan says, you are very helpful. Thank you. Well, thank you. Blifford says, are you judging this year? No, I am not. I probably never will judge again. They went to a different system. The times when I judged, so today it's all like online, and I don't have any interest in that. The times that I judged, it was here in Houston, and it was physical. They had all the CDs. They played the CD on a boombox. Seppo says playing passages backwards. Yeah, I don't. I think for reading games and just like mixing things up again a little bit, I think that's fine. To me, I'm always looking to find something that's part of a system, and that's not really something that's part of the system that I can think of. So something to do to change things up a little bit, I can see that. All right, we're over time. Uh, any last questions before we move on? It was here. We had a very good session. Let me know if the sharing of the screen thing worked okay, because I might do a bunch of that stuff later. Anyway, any other questions? All right, so we'll call it quits for now. Thanks for joining us. It's always great when we have people with good questions, and you guys had lots of good questions today. Thank you for your participation. All right, and we'll get back into it next week. Okay, I think I have a gig next week, but it doesn't. It doesn't conflict with this, so I'm sure that. And yes, I said that out loud. I have a gig next week with the band from Austin. Probably a good choice for a band, a gig coming out of this sickness thing, because we don't play a lot. There is some high note stuff, so I'm gonna have to do at least the master level today. Not today, this week, this coming week. Just to make sure that my chops are still there. Anyway, thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week. God bless you.